Welcome, everybody. Nice to see you once again. Thank you for joining me. I want to talk to you today about synchronicity. It's the force for good that's moving in all of our lives. The word was coined by Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, and he had an experience that led him to come to this understanding. He was therapizing a client who was very difficult. She was very resistant, very much in her head, and couldn't get anywhere in therapy with her. And she was telling him during one session that he tried all kinds of his hypnotic techniques, but nothing worked. And one day she was telling him about a dream she had in which she was given the gift of a golden scarab beetle. And at that very moment, in the therapy session, Jung heard something tapping on his window. And he opened the window, and it was a little golden scarab beetle, like a greenish beetle with a golden back. And it flew in the house, and he captured it. And he said, "Here's your beetle." And it turns out that that kind of beetle was very rare in that part of the world at that season. And he realized that this was a meaningful coincidence. And this particular incident got the client's attention to the point where she got out of her head and into her experience. She realized that there's more going on to the universe than she could figure out with her rational mind. So he coined the term synchronicity, which is caught on. So basically it means that there's a system, an intelligence system of the universe that is always working together like all the little cogs and wheels in a watch, just all interfacing and intertwining and working nicely. And the universe is not random at all, that there's an intelligent design behind it, and there's actually an intelligent design behind each of our lives, even when it doesn't look like that. So a lot of us have been paranoid at times. We feel like the universe is working in conspiracy to get us. But there's another word called metanoia, which is a Greek word, which means a transformation of the mind, going beyond the old mind to a new one. So you can either be a paranoiac or a metanoiac. Metanoiac means that the universe is out to get you, but it's actually out to help you, not hurt you. Now, Albert Einstein, who was a fabulous scientist as well as a mystic, said there's really only one question that we need to answer, fundamental question behind all other questions. And he said, is the universe a friendly place? He said, all other scientific inquiry and philosophical inquiry depends on the answer to that question. He also said many other mystical things. He said that all I really want to know is the mind of God, the thoughts of God. He also said, I have not arrived at my understanding of the universe by way of the rational mind. He also said, there are only two ways to look at life. One is that nothing is a miracle, and the other is that everything is a miracle. So here was a man whose rational mind was developed to the nth degree, but his mystical, spiritual, intuitive mind was equally developed, which is probably how he got to his great discovery. So we want to move from the nothing is a miracle vision to everything is a miracle. So let me give you some examples in my own life of how synchronicity has played out. And as I speak, I'd like you to think about how it has played out or is playing out in yours. So many years ago, I had to move my office, and we were under a timeline. And I found an office that was okay, but not great. It was on a street corner in the city, and we were in a rural area originally, and the rooms were kind of small. It's kind of expensive, but we're under the gun time-wise, so I told the realtor we would take it. We had to move by the beginning of the next month. Well, a week went by, and I hadn't heard anything from him. I said, what happened? He said, well, the owner of the property looked at one of your books, and he doesn't agree with your philosophy. So he doesn't want to rent to you. So I said, isn't that illegal? He says, yeah, but is it really worth it fighting with him? So I said, no. So I'm driving home that day, and I lived in a country area, and a voice said, take the back road instead of the main road. So I just took the back road, and it wound through some beautiful nature areas in Hawaii. And I passed this little country store, and it said for rent. So I went in, and the lady was a lovely lady. She was a Tai Chi teacher. The place had been a Tai Chi studio. The rent was half of what it was at the other place. And it was much closer to my house, and it was in beautiful nature. There was nothing but trees and jungle around it. So we took it, and I was in that office for a number of years. It was a wonderful place. And I thought, well, when that guy rejected me for not liking my philosophy, he was actually pushing me in a better direction. So you've heard me say that there's no such thing as a dead end. Everything that appears to be a dead end is really a T. It's pushing you in another direction. So when something falls through, or you get disappointed, or it didn't work out as you expected, consider the possibility that there's some synchronicity happening, and the universe is actually pushing you in a better direction than you would have gone if you were stuck in the old way. Now, at another time, Dee and I were moving from Maui to Big Island, and we found a property we liked. It was just raw land. We had to build on it, but we liked it. And so we're in the process of making a deal. And just as we were about to fly over to sign the papers, I got a notice from my mortgage company saying that my 10-year interest-only rate had elapsed, and now I was going to be paying principal and interest, which was maybe total of 3 times what the interest only would have been. And I got kind of nervous thinking, well, here I'm going to buy another property, and my monthly nut just went up by three times. So I didn't feel comfortable moving ahead, so we pulled the plug on that deal. A month or two later, we found another property with a beautiful house on it. And it was roughly the same price, just a little bit more. And we moved in. It was much better than the original property. And we looked up. It was just miles below that place that was on the mountainside. And we looked up at the original property we didn't buy, and it was raining almost all the time. There are different microclimates in Hawaii. We were by the ocean, and this one was up on the mountain, and it was raining. It'll be sunny where we were, but raining up on the top where we would have been. I thought, wow, we're sure glad we didn't get into that property. It had a lot of rain on us. So once again, there was a synchronicity going on there. It was a meaningful coincidence, as Carl Jung would have said, that I received that mortgage increase notice on the very day I was about to sign on that property, which prevented me from signing and delayed my move. We ended up in a much better place. So once again, the universe in that case was indeed a friendly place working on my behalf. And then one day, a couple came up to me after a lecture, a lovely couple holding hands, happy in love. And they said, the fellow said, I was just tooling along in my life merrily, and I had an accident, and it put me into a coma. And I was in the hospital for, a week or two in a coma. And he said, when I woke up, I saw the most beautiful angel looking down on me. I thought I went to heaven. And it was not an angel, it was a person. And it turns out that this fellow's mother had a friend who was into religious science, so she invited her friend's daughter to come and pray for this man while he was in coma, and she did. And she was the one who was looking down on him when he woke up. Long story short, he fell in love with her, and they got married. So even him going through a coma was part of the synchronicity of meeting his soulmate. Now, I'm not suggesting you need to go into a coma or have an accident to meet your soulmate. There are far easier ways to do it. But that was his way of doing it. So you see how there are factors working behind the scenes that are rarely obvious to the mortal eye or the rational mind. Now let's flip it a little bit. There's also a thing called negative synchronicity, which means that you can be in the wrong place at the wrong time and weird things can happen. the people who were in the Twin Towers at the wrong time were very unfortunate. And yet, even so, they had a date with destiny because they went home to God. Not a good thing, not an easy thing, but it's the way life works sometimes. Now, around that time, my friend Kelly had a ticket to fly from Boston to New York. She was in the music industry, and she was excited about working on an event that was featuring Michael Jackson. She was living in California. And as the date of the flight approached, she had this very odd feeling, don't take that flight, don't take the flight. So for no reason whatsoever, except her intuition, she didn't take the flight. And that was the flight that was flying from Boston to New York that went into the Twin Towers on that fateful day. I know another guy who was working in the Twin Towers, that was where his office was, and that particular morning he decided to take a few minutes to go to a side street and get some yogurt before he went to work. And that was the exact moment that the planes began to crash. So he was saved, he was spared too. So there's all kinds of things working behind the scenes that we don't see, but mostly working on our behalf. They're always working on it. Even if something weird happens, there's a spiritual lesson, an opportunity behind it. So nothing is all bad. There's always a blessing. And I read about a guy who was he was scheduled to fly on Malaysia Air one day, and he found out he could get a cheaper flight if he flew an hour earlier, and he took that flight. And that was the original flight was the one that was shot down over the Soviet Union. And a few months later, he was on another flight. For some reason, he decided to change it at the last minute. And that was a Malaysia flight that was lost overseas. No one knows whatever happened to it. So he he escaped from 2 Malaysia Air flight crashes within a few months because he had interesting circumstances that changed his ticketing. So there's always something going on behind the scenes. And one of the keys, let's get practical here. One of the keys to making synchronicity work in your favor is to trust and follow your intuition. In other words, my friend Kelly and the fellows on Malaysia Air, the guy who went to get yogurt, they all had this intuition. Let me do this for this moment. And none of them had any real good reasons to do it. But I mean, they seemed to be sort of logistical reasons. But even behind the logistical reasons, there was a blessing reason. So I tell these stories only to indicate that we all have guardian angels who are whispering in our ears. I heard about another lady she was walking down a city street, and this voice said, just go to the other side of the street. And she didn't have a reason to do it, but she did. And as she got to the other side of the street, these armed gunmen were running out of the store that she would have been passing. And she was on the other side of the street, fortunately. So we have our angels who are on the job. We have our guides and our guardians who are on the job. We have departed relatives who are on the job. We have Jesus and the saints and Buddhas and Mohammeds and Moseses and, all kinds of people who, where we have a team. We all have teams of people, spiritual and physical, who are working on our behalf. And even if you don't believe in a team, you and I have a direct connection to Great Spirit. Now, the Course in Miracles calls this part of our mind the Holy Spirit. And according to the Course in Miracles, the Holy Spirit is the mind of God that is seated and embedded in our mind. So basically, it's a direct line of communication from the divine within us. It's not like it's somewhere out there. It's really inside of us, whispering, speaking, guiding, nudging, urging, intuiting, counseling, coaching, soothing. And so what if we just relaxed a little bit and said, even though weird things seem to be happening around us in the world and in our personal lives, our business lives, there's synchronicity. What made that little beetle tap on Carl Jung's window at the very moment he was counseling a woman who had a dream about a golden beetle the night before. How did that happen? And, the people that we meet are sent by God for reasons that somebody is standing next to in a bookstore, or you meet at Starbucks, or sitting next to you in a classroom. Or I even remember long ago, see if I can remember this, a guy bought a telephone and he returned it. Let me backtrack here. A guy got a call from somebody, he was living in Hawaii, and he got a call from somebody in Utah. And it was this lady. And they started talking, and he said, "How did you get my number?" And what had happened was she had gone to Radio Shack and bought a phone. And the phone had previously been bought by somebody else and returned. And while the previous owner had it, they had put a number or two in speed dial. And they didn't erase it before the phones returned to Radio Shack. So this lady opened up the phone and she somehow pressed the button for speed dial, and it went to this guy in Hawaii. She followed this funny chain of events, but that's how it happened. So they ended up talking. They called again for hours, talked again for hours. So they ended up falling in love and getting married, because the previous owner of this phone, who owned it for a day, returned it with this guy's speed dial. She was a friend of his, I guess. The guy's speed dial number in the system. Now, how do you explain that? Synchronicity. It was a meaningful coincidence. It was not just random. And lots of people signing up for Match.com and dating service. That's all good. A lot of people find lovely mates that way. And I like to say that God has a dating service, that there is a divine Match.com. And there are ways that you meet people that you never would have met. How did I meet Dee? Well, I had just broken up from a relationship. This was 20 years ago, actually. And I said, I'm not going to do a crazy relationship again. It was kind of dysfunctional and dramatic. And I said, if I'm going to be with somebody, it's going to have to be just peaceful. And then I was hired to speak at Unity Church of Maui one Sunday. And Dee, who had gotten divorced and moved to Maui from San Francisco just a few months earlier, 1 week earlier, she was hired to be the administrator at the Unity Church of Maui. And my event was the first event that she was hired to coordinate. And so we met. She had just been there 1 week. And we hit it off. We just became friends. There was no great instant romance. It was just, hey, nice person. And we started hanging out, and we started hanging out more and more and more. And eventually we're hanging out all the time. We've been together for 20 years now. It's been a wonderful, wonderful relationship. So grateful for her. And so who organized that? What was the timing of that? 1 week and another, 1 week difference, and we might not have met. But you see, there's no such thing as we might not have. You understand? Let's get that out of our consciousness. That's the ego. This is, I miss my soulmate, or I miss my right job, or I miss my right house. No. It never works like that. You don't miss anything. Because if something is right for you, it will show up. It will show up in the right time and with no struggle or effort on your part. And you've heard me quote from A Course in Miracles. This is when you have learned how to decide with God, all decisions become as right and easy as breathing. And you'll be led as if going down a quiet path in summer. So that's how easy synchronicity can be. That's how gentle it can be. So my prayer and my knowing for you is that your lives are guided by a higher power that is not only intelligent, but is absolutely loving. That is the power of synchronicity in our lives. Before we close, I just want to remind you that we're starting our next coach training, a holistic life coach training in January, and it's starting to fill up, actually. We have just a few spaces left. So if you're interested in becoming a certified professional holistic life coach with me and a wonderful group for about 6 months starting in January, now would be the time to go to my website, alancohen.com, and sign up. Okay, love you guys. It's so wonderful to see you every week. I love your comments. I read all of your comments. I thank all of your comments. I pray for you. I know that we're all in this together, that we are growing and expanding and becoming more God-like every day, and that wonderful synchronicities are happening in your life. Even as we speak, at this very moment, divine synchronicity is lining everything up in our favor for a highest destiny. God is good. So it is. Love you lots. See you next week. Thanks for tuning in.